The ink was already staining the tip of my index finger, a dark, permanent reminder of the choice I was about to make. I stood in the sterile, suffocating silence of room 4012 at the Harbor View Medical Center, the rhythmic, mechanical wheeze of a ventilator, the only thing filling the void where my sister's voice should have been. Outside, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long, jagged shadows across the linoleum floor, shadows that felt like they were reaching for me. I looked down at the document on the rolling bedside table, authorization for withdrawal of life-sustaining treatment. The words were cold, clinical, and utterly devastating. To my left, Julian, my brother-in-law of 12 years, stood with his head bowed, a hand resting, supportively, on my shoulder. His grip was firm, almost anchoring me to the spot, but there was a tension in his fingers that I couldn't quite name. Beside him stood a woman I'd only met 48 hours ago, Maya, a bereavement specialist, who had seemingly appeared out of the hospital's beige wallpaper the moment I arrived. My hand trembled as I lowered the pen toward the signature line. This was Clara, my baby sister, the woman who still called me every Sunday just to tell me what she'd cooked for dinner, the woman who had been my entire world since our parents were taken from us in a car accident 20 years ago. And now I was being told she was gone, a sudden, neurological event, they called it, a massive seizure that had left her brain quiet and her body a shell. But just as the metal tip of the pen brushed the paper, a cold hand clamped down on my wrist. I gasped, looking up. It was the young nurse who had been checking Clara's vitals for the last hour. Her name tag read Elena, and her face was a mask of calculated calm, but her eyes, those eyes were wide, vibrating with a terror so profound it made my blood turn to ice. "Don't sign that," she whispered, her voice a sharp blade cutting through the silence. "Please, if you love her, don't sign a single thing. Just give me 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, you'll understand." I froze. Julian's hand tightened on my shoulder, his voice dropping an octave, smooth as polished stone. "Nurse, I think you're overstepping. My sister-in-law is in a lot of pain. We've discussed this with the doctors. Clara wouldn't want to live like this." The nurse didn't look at him. She kept her gaze locked on mine, a silent plea screaming from behind her pupils. 10 minutes, she repeated. The consultation room down the hall. Please. I looked at Julian. His face was a picture of grieving frustration, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes, a flash of pure, unadulterated rage that vanished as quickly as it appeared. I looked at Maya, the specialist, who was now fidgeting with the strap of an Hermes bag that seemed far too expensive for a hospital employee. My gut, that primal instinct I'd spent 40 years honing as a high school principal, flared to life. Something was wrong. Terribly, horribly wrong. "Julian," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "She's right, I need 10 minutes. I need to be sure. This is my sister's life." "Elena, honey, you're exhausted," Julian said, reaching for the pen himself. "I can sign as her spouse. I just wanted you to be part of it, to have closure." "No," I said, pulling the paper toward me. "Wet for me here. 10 minutes." I followed the nurse out of the room. She didn't stop at the consultation room. She kept walking, her pace frantic, leading me through a maze of corridors until we reached a small, windowless break room near the back of the ward. She locked the door and leaned against it, her chest heaving. "What is this?" I demanded. "What are you doing?" "I'm saving her life," Elena whispered, "and maybe yours. Miss Reynolds, I've been watching your sister's charts. I've been a neuro-ICU nurse for 6 years. I know what brain death looks like. I know what a terminal coma looks like. And I'm telling you, your sister is neither." The world seemed to tilt. But the doctor, Dr. Sterling, he said the EG was flat. He said there was no hope. "Dr. Sterling is lying," she said, her voice shaking. I checked the raw data on the monitor while he was out of the room. "There's activity. It's suppressed, heavily suppressed, but it's there." And then I saw the medication logs. Someone has been bypassing the automated dispensing system. Someone is giving her massive, off-book doses of benzodiazepines and paralytics. It's not a coma, Miss Reynolds. It's a chemical cage. I felt like I was drowning. Who? Why would someone do that? I don't know who, she said, pulling a tablet from her scrub pocket. But I know when. Look at this. I'm friends with the head of security. I told him I lost my watch and needed to check the footage from the hallway outside room 412. Watch. She hit play. The grainy black and white footage showed the hallway 3 nights ago. I saw Julian. He was standing outside the door, looking left and right. Then, the woman, Maya, appeared. They didn't look like a grieving husband and a professional counselor. They looked like lovers. He pulled her into an alcove, and they shared a long, passionate kiss. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what happened next. Julian pulled a small vial from his pocket and handed it to a man in a white lab coat. Dr. Sterling. The doctor nodded, tucked the vial into his pocket, and walked into Clara's room. They're killing her, I whispered, the words tasting like ash. They're trying to, Elena said. They need you to sign those papers because the insurance policy has a double indemnity clause for natural neurological failure. If life support is removed by family consent. But if she dies while the machines are on, there's an automatic autopsy required by the state because of her age. If you sign those papers and they unhook her, the hospital's policy allows for immediate cremation if the family requests it. No autopsy. No evidence. They get the money, and they get away with it. I looked at the screen again. My sister, my beautiful, vibrant Clara, was being erased by the man she had loved. All for a payout. All for a life he wanted to start with someone else. How much time do we have? I asked. 10 minutes were up 2 minutes ago. Elena said. They're gonna come looking for you. Then we have to move fast, I said. Is there anyone in this hospital we can trust? Dr. Aris, Elena said instantly. He's the chief of staff. He's old school, incorruptible. But he's in surgery right now. He won't be out for another 20 minutes. Then I have to stall, I said. I have to go back in there and act like I don't know a thing. Can you get to the police? Can you get someone to test her blood for those drugs? I already drew a sample, Elena said, her eyes flashing with a sudden, fierce bravery. I hid it in the lab under a different name. I just need someone to run it who isn't in Sterling's pocket. Go, I told her. Go now. I'll buy us the time. I walked back down the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had to be perfect. I had to be the grieving, broken sister they expected. When I entered the room, Julian and Maya were standing by the window, their voices low. They snapped apart as the door clicked shut. Elena, Julian said, his voice dripping with false concern. You were gone a long time. Is everything okay? What did the nurse want? Oh, I said, wiping a fake tear from my eye. Just technical things. About the arrangements. She was very kind. She just wanted to make sure I understood the process of what happens. After, Julian moved toward me, his hand reaching for mine. I fought the urge to recoil. His skin felt like a reptile's. It's hard, I know, but once it's done, she'll be at peace. We can finally start to heal. You're right, I said, picking up the pen. I want to say one more prayer alone. Can I have 5 minutes? Just 5 minutes of silence with her. Then I'll sign everything. Maya stepped forward, her brow furrowed. Mr. Thornton, perhaps we should just get this over with. The longer we wait, the more traumatic it is for everyone. 5 minutes, Julian said, his eyes narrowing. He was sensing something, a shift in the air. But only 5, Elena. The doctors are waiting. They stepped out into the hall. The moment the door closed, I flew to Clara's side. I looked at the IV lines, the clear liquid dripping slowly into her vein. Was this the poison? Was this the cage? I leaned down and whispered into her ear. Clara, if you can hear me, don't give up. I'm here. I know what he did. I'm going to get you out of here, I promise. Just hold on for a few more minutes. I saw it then, a tiny, almost imperceptible twitch of her thumb. It wasn't a reflex. It was a response. I looked around the room. I needed proof. I needed something more than just a grainy video. I saw Julian's jacket draped over a chair near the corner. I moved toward it, my breath shallow. I reached into the inner pocket. My fingers brushed against something cold and glass. A vial, it was empty, but the label was still attached. Vecuronium, a powerful paralytic, not something a husband should be carrying in his blazer. Suddenly the door swung open. Julian wasn't smiling anymore. "What are you doing with my coat, Elena?" I stood my ground, clutching the vial in my hand. "I was looking for a tissue, Julian, but I found this instead. Care to explain why you're carrying hospital-grade paralytics?" His face transformed. The mask of the grieving husband shattered, revealing the jagged, ugly truth beneath. He stepped into the room and locked the door. Maya followed him, her face cold and hard. "Give it to me," Julian said, his voice a low growl. "No," I said, backing toward the bed. "I know what you're doing. I know about you and Maya. I know about the insurance. I know you've been drugging my sister." Julian laughed, a harsh, dry sound. "And who are you going to tell, Elena?" "The doctor who's already helping us. The police who will see a distraught, grieving woman making wild accusations. You're going to sign those papers. One way or another." He moved toward me, but I didn't back down. I reached over and hit the code blue button on the wall. "What are you doing?" he screamed. "I'm inviting the whole hospital to the party," I said. The alarm blared, a piercing, high-pitched scream that echoed through the ward. Julian lunged for me, his hands reaching for my throat, but the door burst open. It wasn't a crash cart team. It was the police, led by the young nurse Elena and an older man in a white coat, Dr. Eris. "Get away from her," the officer shouted, his weapon drawn. Julian froze. Maya tried to duck past them, but two more officers were waiting in the hall. "Julian Thornton," the officer said, "you're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy. Dr. Sterling is already in custody." I fell into a chair, the adrenaline leaving my body in a sickening rush. Dr. Eris rushed to Clara's side, his hands moving with expert precision. "She's heavily sedated," he said, checking her pupils, "but she's alive. Nurse, get me a Narcan drip and a full tox screen panel immediately. We need to flush her system." The next few hours were a blur of flashing lights, statements, and the steady, quiet work of doctors who actually cared. I sat in the hallway, my head in my hands, until a shadow fell over me. It was Elena, the nurse. She looked exhausted, but there was a smile on her face. "She's breathing on her own," she whispered. "We took her off the ventilator 10 minutes ago. She's not awake yet, but the drugs are clearing. She's going to make it." I burst into tears, the kind of deep, gut-wrenching sobs that only come when a nightmare finally ends. "Thank you," I choked out. "How can I ever thank you?" "Just be there when she wakes up," Elena said. "She's going to have a lot of questions." It took 3 weeks for Clara to come home. The recovery was slow. The drugs had taken a toll on her system, and the trauma of what Julian had done was a wound that would take years to heal. But she was alive. The trial was the lead story on every news station in the state. The evidence was overwhelming. The video footage, the empty vials found in Julian's car, and the testimony of Dr. Sterling, who turned on Julian the moment the handcuffs were on his wrists. Julian and Maya were sentenced to life in prison. Dr. Sterling lost his license and was sent away for 20 years. But the real story wasn't the trial. It was what happened after. 6 months later, Clara and I were sitting on the porch of our family's old summer cottage, the one Julian had tried to force her to sell. The air was thick with the scent of salt and pine, and the sound of the waves was a lullaby we'd known since childhood. Clara looked at her hands, which were steady now. "I remember the dark," she said quietly. "I remember feeling like I was at the bottom of a very deep well. I could hear his voice. I could hear him telling me it was okay to let go, and I wanted to. It was so heavy, Elena. The sleep was so heavy." "I know," I said, squeezing her hand. "But then I heard you," she said, looking at me with eyes that were clear and bright. "I heard you tell me you were there. I heard you tell me you knew. And I realized, if you weren't giving up, I couldn't either." I looked out at the ocean, thinking about those 10 minutes in the hospital. 10 minutes that had been the difference between a funeral and a future. You know, I said, that nurse, Elena, she's finishing her practitioner's degree. I'm helping her with the tuition. Clara smiled. She's the reason we're sitting here? No, I said. We're sitting here because we're sisters, and nothing, not even a monster like Julian, could break that. As the sun set over the water, I realized that life is made of these tiny, pivotal moments. Moments where you have to decide to trust the whisper over the shout, the instinct over the evidence. I almost signed my sister's life away because I was afraid to make a scene, afraid to be difficult, afraid to challenge the people in power. But a stranger had the courage to speak up, and because she did, the light didn't go out. I'm telling you this story because I want you to remember something. If you ever find yourself in a room where something doesn't feel right, if the smiles feel too sharp, if the urgency feels like a trap, if your soul is screaming at you to stop, listen to it. Don't worry about being polite. Don't worry about what the neighbors will think. Your instinct is the oldest part of you. It's the part that knows the shadows before they even move. Trust it. It might just be the only thing standing between you and the dark. And as for Clara, she's doing more than just surviving. Last week, she booked a trip. Not to a hospital, not to a therapist, but to the mountains. She's going to hike the trail we used to talk about when we were kids. She's going to breathe the thin, cold air and feel the sun on her face. She's alive, and in the end, that is the only justice that matters. The quiet of the porch was interrupted by the soft ring of a telephone inside the house. Clara stood up, her movements fluid and strong. She didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like a woman who had reclaimed her own narrative. Watching her walk, I felt a surge of pride so intense it brought tears to my eyes. We had survived the unthinkable. As the weeks turned into months, the world moved on, but the lessons we learned remained etched into our souls. I returned to my job as a principal, but I was different. I looked at the students differently. I looked at the staff differently. I looked for the silences, the things left unsaid, the small signs of distress that most people ignore. I became a guardian of the gut feeling. One afternoon, about a year after the incident, a young woman walked into my office. She looked nervous, her hands twisting the hem of her sweater. She told me a story about a situation at home, something that sounded fine on the surface but felt wrong in her chest. I sat back, thinking of that Tuesday afternoon at Harborview. I thought of the ink on my finger and the terror in the nurse's eyes. Sit down, I told her. Tell me everything. And don't leave out the parts that don't make sense. Those are usually the most important parts. She talked for an hour, and as she spoke, I realized that the cycle of protection never truly ends. We are all, at some point, the person with the pen in our hand, and we are all, at some point, the voice whispering, "Don't sign." The beauty of life isn't found in the moments when everything goes right. It's found in the moments when we choose to do what is right, even when it's terrifying. It's found in the 10 minutes that change everything. I looked at a photo on my desk, a picture of Clara and me at the beach, taken just a month ago. We were laughing, our hair windswept, the horizon infinite behind us. We had been given a second chance, a gift that most people never receive, and we weren't going to waste a single second of it. The trial of Julian Thornton and his accomplices was a landmark case, prompting new legislation regarding the protocols for declaring brain death and the oversight of end-of-life care. It was called Clara's Law. It required independent neurological evaluations from doctors with no connection to the primary attending physician in cases where life support was to be withdrawn. It was a small victory in a world that can often feel cold and indifferent, but it was a victory nonetheless. Nurse Elena, whose real name I will keep private to protect her career, became a close friend. She eventually left the ICU, finding the emotional weight too heavy after what had happened. She now works in a pediatric clinic, where her sharp eyes and protective spirit are used to keep children safe. We meet for coffee once a month, and we never talk about that day. We don't have to. The bond between us is forged in something stronger than words. Julian wrote to me once from prison. He tried to apologize, tried to blame his actions on a moment of madness and the influence of Maya. I didn't finish reading the letter. I burned it in the fireplace of the cottage, watching the lies turn to smoke and vanish into the night air. He didn't deserve my anger, and he certainly didn't deserve my forgiveness. He was a ghost, a remnant of a life that no longer existed. Clara eventually met someone new, a man who was quiet, kind, and who worked as a librarian. He didn't have Julian's flash or his expensive cars, but he looked at Clara like she was the most precious thing in the world, not because of what she owned, but because of who she was. I remember the first time I saw them together, really together. They were sitting on a park bench, sharing a bag of cherries, talking about a book they had both read. I watched them from a distance, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the tension in my own shoulders finally dissolve. The world was right again. So, if you're listening to this and you're carrying a heavy burden, or you're facing a choice that feels impossible, take a breath. Look around you. Is there a voice you're ignoring? Is there a truth you're afraid to see? Don't be afraid to wait. Don't be afraid to ask for 10 minutes. Because in those 10 minutes, the entire world can shift, the truth can emerge, and the life you thought was lost can find its way back to the light. Trust yourself. Trust your sisters and brothers. And above all, trust that the truth has a way of coming home, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. This isn't just a story about a crime. It's a story about the resilience of the human spirit and the power of a single person to make a difference. Stay vigilant, stay kind, and never, ever sign away your hope without a fight. The sun had finally disappeared, leaving the sky a deep, bruised purple. I walked inside and found Clara in the kitchen, making tea. The steam rose in gentle swirls, and the house felt warm, safe, and full of life. "Everything okay?" she asked, noticing the look on my face. "Everything is perfect," I said, and for the first time in my life, I knew it was the absolute truth. As the years went by, the memory of that day at Harborview didn't fade, but it changed. It stopped being a source of trauma and became a foundation of strength. Clara and I became advocates, speaking at conferences for medical ethics and patient rights. We shared our story not to dwell on the horror, but to highlight the necessity of vigilance. I remember one specific evening, speaking to a room full of graduating nursing students. I saw a young woman in the front row, her eyes bright and familiar. She reminded me so much of Alina. "You are the last line of defense," I told them. "You are the ones who see what the doctors miss. You are the ones who hear the whispers in the hallways. Don't ever underestimate the power of your presence. You might be the only person standing between a patient and a catastrophe." After the speech, that young woman came up to me. She told me she had been having doubts about her career, wondering if she was cut out for the intensity of the hospital. "After hearing your story," she said, "I realize that I'm not just there to give medicine. I'm there to be a witness." "Exactly," I said. "And that is the most important job in the world." Clara's hike in the mountains was a success. She sent me a photo from the summit. She was glowing, her face flushed with exertion and triumph. Behind her, the peak stretched out like the spine of the world. She had conquered the mountain, just as she had conquered the cage Julian had built for her. We still have our monthly lunches, just like we did before the accident. But now, we don't just talk about aging or travel plans. We talk about the deep stuff. We talk about what it means to be truly alive. We talk about the gratitude we feel for every breath, every sunrise, and every cup of tea. The big house Julian bought for her was sold long ago. Clara didn't want the memories that came with its marble floors and vaulted ceilings. She bought a small, cozy bungalow in a neighborhood full of trees and children playing in the streets. It's a house filled with books, plants, and the sound of music. It's a house where she is safe. Sometimes, late at night, I think about what would have happened if I had signed that paper. I think about the silence that would have followed, the empty years, the guilt that would have eventually consumed me. It's a dark path, one I don't let myself walk down for long. Because I didn't sign. I chose to listen. I chose to wait. I chose to fight. And because of that, my sister is here. This story is a testament to the power of no. It's a testament to the power of wet. In a world that is always rushing, always pushing for the next thing, the most radical thing you can do is stand still and demand the truth. So, as I finish this narration, I want to leave you with one final thought. You are stronger than you know. Your intuition is sharper than you realize. And you are never, ever alone in the fight for what is right. Keep your eyes open, keep your heart brave, and remember that the light always, always finds a way to break through the cracks. This has been the story of a Tuesday afternoon that changed everything. A story of betrayal, courage, and the unbreakable bond of sisterhood. I hope it stays with you. I hope it reminds you to trust yourself. Good night, and take care of each other. The world can be a dark place, but as long as we have people like Elena the nurse, and as long as we have the courage to listen to them, the darkness will never win. I looked over at Clara, who was now reading a book on the sofa, a cat curled up at her feet. She looked up and smiled, and in that smile, I saw the end of the nightmare and the beginning of a long, beautiful dream. The end of this story is just the beginning of her life, and that is the most satisfying conclusion I could ever ask for. I often wonder if Julian ever thinks about that 10-minute window. Does he sit in his cell and replay those moments? Does he realize that his entire elaborate plan crumbled because of a single nurse's observation and a sister's refusal to give up? I hope he does. I hope the weight of his failure is a constant companion, not out of malice, but out of a desire for true justice. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about the restoration of what was nearly taken. It's about Clara walking in the sun. It's about the scholarship we started for nurses who exhibit moral courage. It's about the lives that will be saved because people heard our story and decided to ask one more question. Clara's trip to Italy finally happened. Not the way she originally planned with Julian, but with me and Alina. We stood on the cliffs of Amalfi, the air warm and smelling of lemons. We drank wine and laughed until our sides ached. We toasted to the strangers who become heroes and the family we choose to protect. We stayed in a small villa overlooking the sea. One night as we sat on the terrace, Elena turned to us. "You know," she said, "I almost didn't say anything that day. I was so afraid of Dr. Sterling. I was afraid of losing my career. I almost let you sign." Clara took her hand. "But you didn't. I saw your sister's face," Elena said, looking at me. "I saw how much you loved her, and I realized that if I didn't speak up, I'd be the one living in a cage for the rest of my life. A cage of my own silence." We sat in silence then, watching the lights of the boats dancing on the water. It was a moment of profound peace, a moment that felt like the final piece of the puzzle falling into place. We returned home changed. Not because the world had changed, but because we had. We knew the value of a single voice. We knew that the truth is a living thing, something that requires care and protection. I continue to share this story because it belongs to everyone. It belongs to anyone who has ever felt a cold shiver down their spine for no apparent reason. It belongs to anyone who has been told they are being emotional or irrational when they knew something was wrong. Your emotions are data. Your instincts are evolution's gift to you. Use them. The hospital where it all happened has a new wing now. It's dedicated to patient advocacy. There's a plaque at the entrance with a quote that Clara chose. "The truth is not a destination, but a light by which we travel." Every time I pass that hospital, I don't feel the old fear. I feel a sense of accomplishment. We turned a place of darkness into a place of light. We took a story of attempted murder and turned it into a story of life. And as for the pen, the one I almost used to sign those papers, I kept it. It sits on my desk, a small, silver reminder of how close we came to the edge. It reminds me every day that our choices matter, that our voices matter, and that 10 minutes can change the world. As I look out the window today, the sky is clear and blue. The trees are budding, a sign of the coming spring. Clara is in the garden planting roses. She's wearing a wide-brimmed hat and humming a tune I haven't heard in years. It's a good day, a day that almost didn't happen. I think about the thousands of people who might be in a similar situation right now. People standing in hospital rooms, in lawyers' offices, in boardrooms, feeling that same pressure to just sign the papers and move on. To them, I say wait. Listen to the nurse. Listen to the stranger. Listen to the small, quiet voice in the back of your head that says something isn't right. Give yourself 10 minutes. You might just find that those 10 minutes are the most important time of your life. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gives you strength. I hope it gives you courage. And most of all, I hope it reminds you that you are the author of your own life, and no one else gets to write the ending for you. Be brave, be bold, and always, always trust your gut. The story of the Reynolds sisters didn't end in room 412. It began there. It began with a refusal to accept a lie and a commitment to fight for the truth. And it continues every day, in every breath Clara takes, and in every story we tell. The light is back. And this time we're never letting it go. I can see Clara waving to me from the garden. She found a bloom, the first one of the season. It's a deep, vibrant red, the color of life, the color of passion, the color of survival. I'm going to go join her now. We have a lot of living left to do, and we're going to enjoy every single second of it. The world is wide, the future is bright, and for the first time in a very long time, everything is exactly as it should be. Farewell, and remember, your instinct is your greatest ally. Trust it, and it will never lead you astray. The silence of the hospital has been replaced by the song of the world, and it is the most beautiful sound I have ever heard. I'm closing the book on this chapter now, but the story goes on. It goes on in the lives we've touched and the truth we've upheld, and that is the greatest legacy of all. I walk out the door, the sun hitting my face, and I head toward the garden, toward my sister, toward the life we fought so hard to keep. And as I walk, I realize that I'm not just walking toward her. I'm walking toward myself, the woman I became when I chose to listen, the woman I became when I chose to fight, and she is someone I am finally proud to be. The journey was long, the path was treacherous, but we made it. We're home, and we're finally truly free.